Now, we all know the Bible to be one of the most popular books in human history, and it's read by about 4 billion people. In fact, they said about 2 billion Christians, and we add a billion Muslims and a billion Jews on top of that, and we have about 4 billion people reading the same book. And it's also said to be one of the best-selling books and the longest surviving books in human history. But what if someone would tell you that the book was compiled to deceive humanity because it gives us a description of three different messiahs, and two are in comparison because one is the father and the other is the son, and these are depicted in the scripture as Emmanuel, who was supposed to be the father and would have a government upon his shoulders. In other words, he was to be a ruler, as well as a suffering servant, whom we found in Isaiah 53. Actually, Isaiah 53 starts at Isaiah 52, I believe it verse 12 or verse 13, where this character makes his entrance in the global stage and shocks world rulers because of what he'll be prescribing as an alternative government or social system, while having the support of the majority of the world. And also in the books of Enoch, this Messiah is depicted as someone who will destroy rulers as well as the rich who will have gained the world through their hard works, because we'll be preventing a different social system, thus ending the illusion of the matrix, that is the physical world, and thus presenting us with multiple dimensions, and thus in so doing ending our usual relevance or dominion of the physical world by presenting a different social system, thus establishing the kingdoms of the heavens. But as much as we can analyze religion, in particular Christianity, and look into the Christian calendar, which happens to be an events calendar, using it, you can actually tell as to when is December 25th, but you cannot use the same calendar and tell us as to when will Jesus come, or you cannot use the same calendar to as evidence of Jesus' existence. And we also have the dilemma of Jews who do not believe in Jesus because of the discrepancies within the same story. And these are the people who have been hired to be the scholars of the Jewish tradition, which was essentially or originally a black culture. But things here changed after, I think I'll have to depict the story of the two messiahs and help you understand the history and the difference between the two. Now, according to Ethiopian history and tradition, a queen named Makeda visited King Solomon, who was famous for his knowledge and wisdom. And this queen happened to have no husband. And it said that Solomon tricked her, and they eventually had a son. And this son was named Menelik I. And while Menelik became an adult, he was taunted because he didn't know his father. And eventually his mother told him, and he visited King Solomon in Jerusalem, and eventually returned with the Ark of the Covenant. Now, this Ark of the Covenant was to symbolize that God's covenant with Jerusalem has ended due to the fact that King Solomon had followed foreign pagan gods, and that God had a new covenant with Africa in the form of Ethiopia, because this Ark of the Covenant was to now move into Ethiopia, and it was supposed to act as God's throne, which had two cherubims on two sides. And these two cherubims representing the two gods who proposed the creation of this world, and those being Micha-El as well as Gabriel, also depicted in scripture as the two olive trees, as well as the two witnesses in Revelations 11. And so the Ark of the Covenant ended up in Ethiopia, and a king was born there by the name of Rastafari Makonnen, who eventually was coronated by 72 nations, excluding African countries, and they named him the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and conquering Lion of the tribe of Judah, due to their knowledge or understanding of the scripture, which they have used to deceive the rest of us. But when the time came, they went there to show their respect. So that further prophecies were fulfilled, because the coronation of the emperor was the fulfillment of Isaiah, I think 9, chapter 9, yes. But the Second World War was the fulfillment of Joel 3, as well as Psalms 2, apart from many others. And so using the scripture, we can actually depict or prove the divinity or the prophecies fulfilled by the emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie. But this emperor also had servant in the form of the Son, known as the suffering servant, upon which the famous lines by his stripes were healed is taken from. That is from Isaiah 52. And unfortunately for Christianity or religion, this suffering servant is said to be a human being familiar with suffering, loneliness, sicknesses, etc. And so if this is the case, it cannot be Jesus, because Jesus was a healer, not a sick man, and was not and Jesus is often depicted as someone who had magical powers and was above life rather than a human being suffering with the rest of others. And according to scripture, the suffering of the servant is due to his knowledge of divinity as well as human affairs. This is due to the fact that human beings have 6 electrons, 6 protons, and 6 neurons. And so if the scriptures are saying that Jesus was hanging a cross, that he had blood, he could eat fish, etc., this actually tells us that Jesus had a physical body. And so having a physical body means that he was made up of 6 electrons, 6 protons, and 6 neurons. But in the case of Micha-El, who's also depicted as the prince in Daniel 12, meaning that Michael belongs to an eternal kingdom where he is the eternal prince. Thus he becomes the prince of every black person, and because black people were used to create all other races, so he's the prince of all humanity. But this Michael has a second personality, which is made up of a physical body, a human body. And this personality is known as Messiah. And this Messiah has 6 electrons, 6 protons, and 6 neurons, and is a template upon which human beings are created upon. And so this tells us that Michael or Messiah, when it is born on earth, will be suffering due to the fact that we'll understand human conditions better than the rest of us, together with divinity. But we'll find it difficult to live in a world which has created a false religion at his expense by imposing a false God in the form of Jesus. Because if we were to analyze or go back into history and study Egyptian gods, we'll soon realize that the story of Jesus is taken from the Egyptian sun god, also known as Hero. And the 12 disciples being the 12 months of the year that the sun, the earth revolves around the sun. And the cross refers to the 4 cardinal zones, the north, east, south, and west. And the rays of, and the crown of thorns refers to the sun's rays when it's seen beyond clouds. And so the allegory, the story of Jesus is actually an allegory adopted from Kemet or Egypt, and is not necessarily a true reflection of a divine personality, but an allegory representing the sun or the personification of the sun. And also, there is no saying or such thing that Jesus had a brother named Michael, or Michael had a brother named Jesus, because one of them is depicted as the prince. So much that his other title, that is Michael, is the Prince of Princes, Messiah the Prince, or the Eternal Prince. Whereas the Father is known as the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, conquering Lion of the tribe of Judah. And so we seem to have a very serious discrepancy concerning religion, which has created an imposter God in order to prevent us from knowing the truth of our divinity, or to prevent the real Messiah from being effective when it does come to incarnate in this world. So in closing, I would like to tell a short story of my encounter with this life as well as Jesus. On my first day upon seeing nature, my first words were, "You are here also, there's no escaping you," because I remember that I'd been here before. But the strange part is that I remember the future. But I also found this world very strange because of its low electromagnetic energies. And these are due to us to not having little access to the rest of our consciousness. And it quickly told me that a world of this nature is governed by evil, or my words were, an evil spirit was in charge of this place, and whoever it is, I will replace him with myself. And so I also remembered the future after being dressed by my mother and went to play with my friends, and there was a huge explosion which destroyed the country, and the mother celebrating it, saying, "Babylon, the witch has fallen." And later on, I remember reading in my Bible on Daniel chapter 12 about the Archangel Michael, as though I was being given a revelation of my identity. And so growing up, I wanted to be this Michael, who would be the Messiah, the Son of the Most High God. And so started doing some researches concerning as to how people depict God in this world. And I first heard them talking about Jehovah, and I liked the name, but it was new to me until they talked about Jesus, whom they made it worse by saying he was a son of God. And this got me very upset and a little bit insecure. So much that we eventually went to church, and with my friends. And what we saw there was an image of a man hanging on the cross. And this got also puzzled us that the church had a roof, because we knew God to be nature or consciousness, and that nature was a reflection of consciousness. And that for us to be exposed to God is for us to be exposed to nature. And so after seeing a hanged body, we went outside or ran outside because we were fearful of the cannibals. And so on my second trip, I didn't tell my friends because I wanted to spy on this Jesus' claim. And I heard his words during a play, where he said, eat, this is my body, drink, this is my blood. And this got me very upset, so much that my words were, who is this? Who does he think he is? And I left the church upset, saying that one day I'll be old and I'll speak for myself. By so doing, I was planning to challenge humanity by presenting my story, thus forcing everyone to pick sides as to who do they believe is the Messiah, between the one who will be challenging them in front of them and the one whom they will be told by religions as well as governments and is still missing in action. And so this was my short take on the truth of the Messiah as well as the imposter.